You're listening to a 3CR podcast of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia.
Radio MMT respectfully acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land from which we are broadcasting, the Wurundjeri people, and we are broadcasting to the Kulin Nations. Our focus is economics, that is, how stuff is produced and distributed. We recognise that for many tens of thousands of years, First Nations people's connection to country successfully embodied the world's oldest continuous economy, which was catastrophically disrupted by genocide and displacement. We acknowledge that we have much to learn to reshape our current extractive and exploitive system to achieve sustainable prosperity for everyone.
Radio MMT. Economics for the rest of us with Anne
and Kev.
Radio MMT.
Looking at the world through the lens of modern monetary theory.
Radio MMT. Macroeconomics for a well-being economy.
Macroeconomics? Isn't that incredibly boring?
No, Kevin, it's incredibly interesting. It's all about who gets what and why.
Who gets what and why? Okay, I'm in.
RadioMMT@gmail.com.
Incredibly interesting macroeconomics for the rest of us.
The following program contains content which some people might find distressing. This includes descriptions of strip searches and incarceration. Please take care and use discretion. Yes, you are with Radio MMT. I'm Anne, your host, and our regular listener will have noticed a lack of Kevin today. While Kevin is away, I thought I would indulge myself in a bit of climate action. So how am I going to link this with what we usually talk about, which is modern monetary theory, a kind of macroeconomics? And that got me thinking about a letter we had recently from our fabulous Fred, one of our listeners. He was talking about how important it is to make the distinction when you are talking about modern monetary theory. Are you talking about it as a description, or have you mixed in some of your own values in there and you're talking about it as a prescription? So part of what modern monetary theory is all about is a description of the monetary system. One of the things that the description tells us, for example, is that the Australian federal government can never run out of Australian dollars, and that is incontrovertible. The most succinct way I know of explaining why that might be is because money is not a thing. It's not something you can run out of. Money is a legally codified accounting system. So the Australian federal government cannot run out of dollars any more than it can run out of numbers. But of course, it can run out of resources. It can run out of stuff to spend the money on, which might include things like coal, which we'll be getting to later in the show. MMT is an analytical framework as well. So it goes beyond being just a description. And you can look at the levers that the government has for managing the economy. For example, fiscal policy, which is spending and taxing, or monetary policy, which is changing your price on money or putting interest rates up and down. And with the analytical framework, you can say, well, what is likely to happen if I flip this switch now? So I'm going to indulge myself today and apply some of my understanding of modern monetary theory to some very specific things that are going on in Australia right now, including how we as a nation are dealing with global warming. So to that end, I am speaking with Rosie, who participated in a non-violent direct action organised by Blockade Australia. So, Rosie, welcome to Radio MMT.
Thanks, Anne. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for indulging me while Kev's away. Blockade Australia tells us on their website that they are an organising network established in response to the destruction of ecosystems that support all human and non-human life. Now, the action in which Rosie took part was part of a campaign by Blockade Australia during July 2024, and that campaign was aimed at shutting down the loading facility at the Newcastle coal port in New South Wales. So the protesters there were aiming to disrupt one of the world's largest fossil fuel supply chains, which is contributing to global warming. And this multi-day campaign saw more than 30 arrests, including one protester who has been sentenced to 3 months in jail under the stricter anti-protest laws that New South Wales introduced in 2022. Before you tell us what you've been involved in recently, can I ask, is this your first experience of being involved in a direct action?
No, it isn't. I think my first involvement was back in 2013 protesting against the East-West Link project, where I joined a group of people blocking workers entering a test drilling site in Fitzroy. Yeah, and even back then the police were pretty rough with the protesters.
Mm-hmm.
Then I joined the Stop Adani movement and did quite a few actions for quite a long period as the Adani coal mine project progressed, despite a massive worldwide campaign against it.
Mm-hmm.
Also with the Adani campaign, one of the highlights was when I joined the Tour de Carmichael, which was a bike ride organised by Wangan Jagalingou, a man, Cody McAvoy, who's the son of Adrian Barragubba, and they are the custodians of the Galilee Basin. And it was brilliant, led by Cody. A big group of us rode our bikes over land supposedly owned by Adani, and we were followed by police and intimidated by workers at the mine, but Cody just kept going, and it was a wonderful, wonderful feeling. And we really got an experience of what it's like to really stand up to the big, greedy players that are destroying this country, basically. And as things ramped up, a new group formed called Galilee Blockade, and I joined that group, and that's when my real non-violent, direct, disruptive action career began.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, Galilee Blockade movement was successful in discouraging investment in Adani's coal mine, especially stopping the railway line that Adani wanted to build to ship his coal out over the Great Barrier Reef. Then I joined Extinction Rebellion when it first began in Australia in 2019. Soon after that was when I experienced my first arrest, although I started off joining rallies and protests and supporting arrestable actions. And then in one campaign, we were marching in the streets and sat down and blocked an intersection, and the police arrived, and what I was expecting I would do was just get up and move when told to, that way avoiding arrest. And I knew that more experienced protesters probably would stay there. So I happened to be sitting beside the now famous Violet Coco, and I always admired her courage and her dedication to getting action on climate change. And she was sitting there, and I suddenly felt very comfortable just staying there too. I knew I had great people around me, the amazingly supportive network of XR people, and you really are completely supported no matter what sort of action you choose to take. And on that day, I thought, no, I'm not going to move. So I sat there. Violet was taken off by the police, and then I was next.
Right.
So that was my first arrest, and fortunately, because there were so many of us being arrested over the campaign period, that the police had set up a mobile processing stand.
Right.
So I didn't get thrown into the divvy van and taken off to the police station, but instead escorted. I must say it was quite amusing. I've got this photo of me being escorted a few metres away to the processing table by 6 heavily armed port police. And
That would be a sight to see.
it was quite amusing. So I was then fined on the spot. Didn't have to appear in court because it was a summary offence, but it was still my first experience of being questioned and arrested.
From what you're saying, it sounds to me like it helps. It really helps to find a group that you're comfortable with and a group that you can trust.
That definitely is the case. And the way that the planning that goes in the actions, the support, the preparation, the training, you can't do an action unless you've done non-violent direct action training. And that includes information on your legal rights, what to expect when you're arrested, etc. And yes, being around like-minded people and people that you trust, because let's face it, all the people that I've come across that are fighting so desperately to save the planet, save what's left of this beautiful planet of ours, they're all extremely kind, wonderful people. And they all care about the same things. We share the same values.
I have to let listeners know, Rosie, as they listen to your story, that I'm looking at you in the same room in front of me, and what I see is a very refined, very poised woman with grey hair, and I share that characteristic with you. And I just want to tell people this because if you've got some kind of a image in your head of what the average direct action protester might look like, what I have in front of me is a somewhat delicate-looking woman.
And the other thing is, I'm not generally a very brave person, I don't think. And also that I'm not usually so sure of myself. My opinion changes when I listen to other information. I'm not always sure if I'm doing the right thing or not, just in life. But with my climate activism, I know 100% that what I'm doing is right. And that really is a powerful thing. And it's not a feeling I get often, to be absolutely sure that what I am doing is right and the system is wrong.
You're listening to 3CR 855 AM on digital and on the internet. www.3cr.org.au.
Let's move on to the most recent direct action you've taken. So tell me about that and what happened on that day.
So the action we're talking about today is my second action with Blockade Australia, and the first time I've been refused bail and the first time I've been detained overnight. So on the day of the action, along with my friend Kat, we decided that we would climb on top of a coal train on its way from the coal mines to the world's biggest coal port in Newcastle. We stood on top of a pile of coal in one of its carriages, dropped a big banner over the side saying, "Stop in the name of life," which is a play on the song.
That can be your theme music.
Because the purpose of that is stopping the train moving, because once there are people on top of the train's not going to move.
Mm-hmm.
So for as long as we were there, the train couldn't move, which meant tons and tons of coal were delayed, trains behind that train were delayed, and that is the whole purpose, to cause as much disruption to the business as usual of getting this coal out of the ground. Because, of course, the way I look at it, fossil fuel companies have only one thing in mind, and that is to make massive, massive profits. That's what they do. And both of us participate in other actions, non-disruptive actions. For example, the Mothers' Rebellion, which Kat is extremely involved in once a month outside the Arts Centre. Mothers and carers gather and do a vigil, and it's a very moving event. So we're both used to singing for the cause, and we liked the idea of the stop in the name of love, so we adapted the lyrics. And then we spent half a day creating a bit of choreography to go with it. I think perhaps we could have spent a little bit more time on it. Yes.
Well, it's a bit hard to break out your dance moves when you've got like rolling bits of coal under your feet.
We felt amazingly safe up there, actually. The carriages are piled quite high with coal, but yes, it's pretty amazing once you're up there. You feel quite safe. So once we were up there, we set up our phone and started live streaming as we danced, sang, shovelled coal over the side down to the earth where it belongs, and spoke and recited our message, which is that we must stop business as usual for the sake of all life on earth before it's too late.
Now, you're based in Melbourne, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes. So you actually travelled interstate to do this?
Yes. Well, it's certainly not the first time I've done that. I've joined protest mobilisations in Queensland, New South Wales, in Adelaide.
You must have figured out a survival kit to take with you.
Warm clothes. It's always cold.
When you're out somewhere.
Outside protesting.
And how did you figure out where this train was exactly? Like, I'm assuming it was parked. It wasn't moving at the time?
Well, so the train had already been stopped. The amazing, amazing young people who do all the planning and the prior preparation, which is just incredible. So I had the easy bit where I didn't have to think too much, but just climb up on this train. And
they're quite tall, aren't they?
They're very, very tall. In fact, things were ready and we got up very safely. It was all very safe. I never felt physically unsafe at all.
Right. How long is it? Like, must be a mile long or so?
I'd say so.
You can't see to the end of it, that's for sure.
No, you can't. And I have to say, the shovelling the coal off the back of the train, which was extremely liberating and empowering and just felt so good. We had seen it done before and we thought it just looked so much fun.
I have to admit, Rosie, that I did see the video that you made that day, and it is very entertaining. One of the things I loved about that video was the way you used humour in that action. And is that intentional?
Oh, that's just how I operate.
It's such a visual of interrupting a supply chain. And I did get a laugh at the sight of you shovelling coal off a coal train, because it just offered such an image of this David Goliath battle when you see these carriages stretching behind you and there you are tossing one shovelful over at a time. And it just highlights, I thought, who's missing in action here, you know, which of course is our federal government.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. They could stop it. We'd much rather not be doing that. They could be the ones who stop the trains.
Well, when you look at two little old ladies on top of a train, you can stop it temporarily, but
well, it is symbolic, but it also was practical, had a practical effect, because we were the second action for the whole mobilisation, which lasted for 16 days.
Okay.
And each day there were 3 actions. So that's a lot of coal trains to stop. And the other actions included other types of disruption, also stopping the loading of the coal at the facility, at the port. So it really did disrupt things.
Has anyone put a dollar price tag on your activities?
Well, funnily enough, in our police charge sheets, which were pretty difficult to understand, but I did note they said that I caused $1 million in costs. No, it was something like $16 million in losses.
Well, in a way, you kind of want that figure to be as big as possible.
Absolutely. I was thrilled.
And how did you get back down again?
The police helped us with that.
So now we're moving on to the moment that you did get arrested, which we've already had some hints about.
Yes.
You're listening to 3CR 855 AM on digital and on the internet, www.3cr.org.au.
About 20 minutes later, the police arrived.
Okay.
And there were about 8 of them appeared, called out to us that we were under arrest and told us to come down. We explained we couldn't get down. We had no way of getting down. So then they called police rescue, who eventually appeared. It all took quite a while. The first time they arrived, we could see their vans, and they had 2 rather small ladders on top of the van. Then they looked up and realised that wasn't going to get up high enough. So by then we had quite a few police and rescue people sort of just looking up at us. And at one point, a police officer told us how ashamed we should be of ourselves for using up police resources when they had other things to do. And it did puzzle us, I have to say, that they needed a dozen police officers and rescue workers for 2 elderly women, happy to come down the coal train as soon as they found us a ladder. In the meantime, as we waited, it was a beautiful day, a beautiful sunny day, and we just sat there and we suddenly realised there were lots of little tiny birds flitting around in the bushes. We could hear them chirping and, I imagine, enjoying the peace and quiet because there were no trains continually 24 hours a day roaring up and down.
In their habitat.
Yep. So it was really quite a peaceful experience. We'd almost forgotten the police were there. We were just sitting there waiting. We did a crossword, we chatted, we reflected on life and nature. It was in the suburbs really, but either side of the railway line there were a bit of natural reserve trees and shrubs and bushes.
You were in suburbia then?
Yes, in suburbia.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
So there must be housing nearby.
Yes.
That are putting up with the rumble of coal trains going past.
Absolutely. Yep, they were probably relieved that it stopped as well. Anyway, eventually they came back with another ladder. This time it was long enough. After a bit of a struggle...
Sounds very slapstick to me.
It was in a way. They finally guided us down the ladder very safely. Then we were marched along the railway line to where the divvy van was waiting for us. We were put into the back of the divvy van together and taken to the Newcastle police station. I have to say I have been in a divvy van before and each time it strikes me how dangerous it is because you're sitting on just a hard metal bench. It's sort of just all moulded in, no seat belts. And often people are handcuffed when they are put in the back of the divvy van. Because I know in the past I've had to insist that handcuffs were removed because I said I will, face plant. But we weren't handcuffed. Then it became progressively unpleasant. Yes, so once we got to Newcastle Police Station, we were processed, which involves taking away our shoelaces, jewellery, prescription glasses, cash, credit card, driver's licence, and we were put into a holding cell, fortunately together. for a while they sorted things out.
Was it only you two in the holding cell?
In our cell, it was only us two.
Mm-hmm.
There were people from our group in another cell. Then we were moved to the docks, which I know that it's called the docks because it had it written on a label
It's a
there.
sign.
So, yeah. So the docks are small barred cubicles in front of the duty police officer's desk. So we were asked lots of questions. I had to sign forms, which I couldn't read because they'd taken away my glasses.
Oh, yes.
But then the first big shock came when we were told that bail had been refused on the grounds that we were a flight risk, which I find quite astounding. Despite my inquiries as to how this decision was made, I was just told that that's what it is, nothing to be done about it. And normally when this happens, you are entitled to see a bail magistrate if you want to contest the bail conditions or contest the refusal of bail. But we were told that the magistrates were all on a big magistrates conference, so we wouldn't be able to see a magistrate till the following day. So at that point, we were handed over to Corrective Services New South Wales, which was in the building just next door, and where we were detained overnight. We were told that surveillance cameras were not working, so we were delayed a bit while they waited for extra staff to arrive so that they could watch the prisoners because the cameras weren't working.
They needed to bring someone in to monitor you.
Yep. And we were also told that there were no female staff available that night, so we would be strip searched the following day instead.
So they told you ahead of time that this was going to happen?
They did. And I expressed my outrage that this should happen, but was told that's just how it is. I was hoping that by the next day they would realise that it was pointless to do it then because we would already have spent the night.
So what's the usual purpose for strip searching someone?
To be sure that they're not concealing any drugs or dangerous items. It was pretty obvious that that was not the case with us. And in fact, with all climate protesters, I'm pretty sure there's never been an incident of anything being found on them. There has also never been an incident of, in my experience with the groups I'm involved in, of skipping bail, people trying to flee, but people are still handcuffed the whole time.
Right. How did you feel that night, knowing that the next day you might be strip searched? Was that intimidating in any way?
Extremely intimidating. In fact, the whole experience from then on was extremely intimidating, and I felt extremely unsafe the whole time I was there. Police detention is unpleasant enough, but corrective services is a different level altogether. The staff there, it's unprofessional to say the least. We were shouted at, intimidated, told things like, you better behave or you'll be in another night. We were told that if we weren't able to see a magistrate that night, we'd have to wait till Monday. And this was a Wednesday. So it was pretty scary. And the other thing is that you have no contact with the outside world. No phone calls are allowed. And we weren't able to call a lawyer that we knew was on standby for us, because then we were put into the hands of corrective services, and then no phone calls at all are allowed. And support people waiting for us outside, and we had no idea they were there. They had come into the station and asked if we were there and what stage things were up to, and that person was given no information, just told, we don't know.
Wow.
So they didn't know if we were okay. We didn't know if people knew that we were there. We didn't really know if they were still waiting, if they had any idea when we were coming out. You feel extremely isolated.
They really effectively cut you off from your sources of support that you had set up to go through this process.
Exactly. We were able to ring the next day when they decided was a suitable time. We were able to ring the duty lawyer because we were going to appear before the magistrate.
Radio MMT.
On 3CR,
Between 5:30 and 6:30 p.m.
the second and fourth Friday of each month.
Radio MMT. If you like our show, subscribe to 3cr.org.au and mention Radio MMT.
And you can find us through your favourite podcaster and give us lots of stars.
And or give us a like on Facebook, Twitter or YouTube.
Your support really helps.
Because if you're not liked on social media, you don't exist.
So every time we left the cell, we had to put our arms outside a little locked window in the glass wall. We would be handcuffed, then the door would be unlocked. So this was the same when we went to make our phone call, which they'd arranged with the duty lawyer. Handcuffs were still on when we were trying to make the phone call, which made it extremely difficult. I was trying to give the lawyer a phone number, which was written on my arm, but I couldn't actually see it because I couldn't pull my sleeve up. But
they sound like they're treating you as like hardened psychotic criminals.
Absolutely. And the worst thing I have to say was that evening, the night we were taken into corrective services, locked in our cell, thank goodness we were together because it would have been so much worse just being alone in that cell. Some staff members came to the cell next door to do the strip search on the occupant of that cell, which was a young person from our group. And what happened next was we heard lots of shouting, abuse, clanging of metal. It sounded like they were clanging chains and keys. It was loud. Threats, really serious threats of violence to this person. It was terrifying.
Oh,
it really was. We were extremely worried about their safety and about our own safety. We didn't know what was coming next to us, but we were extremely concerned about this young person. And as my friend approached the bars to see if she could see anything, this person marched up to her and barked in her face very threatening remarks directed to her and me. And it was felt to us like, you watch out or you'll get the same treatment. It was terrifying. And, you know, at that point we realised that there was no surveillance, so I don't know if this had been recorded.
That's where the no surveillance works against you.
Yes. So it was very scary at that point, and we were both really glad we had each other.
And throughout this whole ordeal, there were only male staff in the building?
That night, yes.
Right.
Yes. And also the whole time I was thinking about, you know, if this is what it's like for us to white, elderly, middle-class women, and how vulnerable we felt, you know, it just really brought back how the most vulnerable people in society are treated the worst. It's just appalling. It's all part of the system, part of the same system that's destroying the planet. It's destroying people's lives in many other ways. I mean, how could this sort of treatment still be meted out to these groups? Haven't we come a bit further? But no.
Take it home, over. Take it home, over.
So the next morning, 2 female staff arrived and I was strip searched, despite the fact that I'd already spent the night in there without incident, and so doing now was completely pointless. I expressed my non-consent but was told there was no choice.
Can you tell me, like, was it worse than you were expecting? Like, tell me about that.
Well, actually, the two women who came, their demeanour and behaviour and our feeling of being unsafe was a much lower than with the male staff. Although they were obviously trained to be very severe, you could tell they were human. But the actual experience, it's interesting. I haven't a fear of police or being arrested. I don't find them intimidating overall. However, I've always thought I wouldn't want to stay overnight in the lockup just because of the things you hear about it, that often you're not given blankets. It's a different level than just being processed. So I thought that sounded really unpleasant, and I would always choose to avoid it if possible, even if that involved signing bail that said I couldn't, go into the CBD for the next fortnight or whatever. I've always sort of thought I will sign bail unless it's extremely prohibitive conditions. And the other thing I always thought would be horrific would be to be strip searched. And I'd sort of always said to myself, if somebody tries to do that to me, I will just scream and scream. But I soon realised that would be completely pointless.
And during the strip searching, were you in the same room or were you separated?
We were taken individually into another room, and I have to say I didn't find it traumatic. The women did it very respectfully, very kindly, and it seemed to me they were just doing their job.
Right,
there was no malice intended, and probably would rather be doing something else. So I didn't find it traumatising. I was very angry about the fact that it was done for, I'm sure, purely reasons of intimidation and
sort of punishment, isn't it?
Yeah. However, having said all of that, I had survived the staying overnight. It was horrible, probably at least as bad as I expected, probably worse, but we survived.
Did you get any sleep that night?
A little bit, yeah, on and off, a bit of sleep. We were so exhausted. But, it was pretty terrifying, really. And you just feel so completely vulnerable and isolated. So the magistrate was due to see us on video link at 9:30 the next morning, which we'd hoped would have meant we'd got out in time to catch our train home. But that didn't happen till about 4 o'clock. And by then we were quite concerned about whether we would be spending another night. And also, because everything had been taken from us, we were thinking if we're just suddenly let out in the dark, we don't know where we are exactly. We've got no money. Fortunately, I had a credit card which I had given to the police, which I hoped they would return to me, and they did. So we had nowhere to stay. We didn't know. We were really thinking, what on earth are we going to do when we get out of here? But we were taken out of ourselves into another little room where there was a video link to the courthouse, and it was all very quick, none of the formalities, and you could see that there's a woman in one of the screens who you assume is your duty lawyer. You hope that's there. And I was the third person seen by the magistrate. He gave me a real scolding. He said, I know why you're doing this, and that's all very well, but don't you realise how you've endangered people's lives and all this rubbish? I pleaded guilty. Then after a bit of a talking to by the magistrate, I was fined $750 plus levies.
I'm wondering who's footing that bill.
I'm paying my fine because I have the capacity to pay the fine, but Blockade Australia does fundraising, and in fact they've got a big campaign on Chuffed, or you can go to their website if you want to make a donation, because most of the people don't have a lot of extra cash. We were finally released almost at the same time. By then there were 4 of us from Blockade Australia who'd been arrested the first day of actions. And I can just remember the relief as I walked out, seeing this wonderful support person with a big smile on her face, big hugs, and it was just wonderful.
They must have been so worried about you.
They were. They had been there for hours and hours, regularly going into the police station and asking about us, and were told nothing, told we don't know if they're here, we don't know where they are. So they just kept waiting and assuming and hoping that we would appear. So we didn't know if there was anybody out there waiting for us. They didn't know what was happening to us. And we'd obviously missed our train to get home back to Melbourne that night. So I'll just say we received lots of wonderful support by the Blockade Australia community. We were very well looked after and had a great opportunity to debrief and made our way home the next day. I still don't know exactly what my charge was that I'd pleaded guilty to. I've since looked on all the paperwork that they gave us, and it's pretty unclear. There's a lot of different things written down, lots of different charges, and I can't see anywhere a clear charge. It's quite different to the paperwork you get in Victoria.
You're listening to 3CR 855 AM on digital and on the internet, www.3cr.org.au.
Well, New South Wales Police Minister Yasmin Cately has been quoted in the media saying of these protests, "This dangerous behaviour is putting not only the lives of workers and the public at risk, but the police officers tasked to respond." Rosie, what would you say in response to that sentiment?
I'd ask the Minister, what evidence is there that my behaviour was dangerous to anyone's lives? It's perfectly clear who it is that's endangering the lives of the whole planet and all life on it. And New South Wales, of course, has got absurdly draconian anti-protest laws brought in last year when Blockade Australia did some very successful and disruptive protests. And of course, Blockade Australia is all about disrupting the system because, people say the system is broken, but it's not. The system is working exactly how it's intended to be working. So we have to disrupt and keep disrupting the system. Blockade Australia doesn't have any demands. They have their mission statement, etc., because they don't believe that it is possible to work with the system as it is. So there's no point making demands. They want to disrupt the system so that change can occur. But if you talk to the people around you without making them take sides, asking what they want, everybody wants the same things. They want their families to be safe. They don't want people to be poor. They don't want people to be homeless.
I'm thinking about how you got a scolding from the police when they were taking you off the coal train, and then you were getting these scoldings from the magistrate. And it's
scoldings from the staff in the detention centre too.
As well.
Absolutely, telling us, be careful when people might not be so kind to you next time if you come in here. And yeah, that's what somebody said.
We also hear that scolding as part of the public debate in the media as well. You're wasting resources and so on and so forth. Your story just highlights for me how there's a theme running through behind closed doors and also out in the public sphere as well.
Oh, yes. It's a very deliberate thing to get public opinion against peaceful climate protest, to make everybody think you are a danger to society, you're selfish, when these young people, as one of them said to me, all through her life, from when she was born, she's 17 years old, there's been a climate emergency. This is what she's lived with her whole life. She was born into this. Yet they're criminalised, they're vilified, and it is so clear that these laws are made because it's what the fossil fuel companies want.
It's really interesting that you say that, because I was listening to the podcast Full Story by The Guardian, and that was their episode from July the 11th, 2024, which was titled Newsroom Edition, Why Anti-Protest Laws Won't Stop Climate Activists.
I'm Bridie Jabor. I'm talking to Editor-in-Chief Lenore Taylor and Climate and Environment Editor Adam Morden about the role of protests in our democracy. It's Friday, the 12th of July. Do the protesters' tactics work? Does disruptive protest work?
Yes, they get public attention. Protests do change the public debate and the public discourse. I mean, think about Black Lives Matter, think about Me Too, think about protests over Palestine. They change what we talk about and they set an agenda. If you look back at protests like, I don't know, the Franklin Dam protests or whatever, you can see the change that they brought about, and you don't actually see the fact that at the time there was a lot of anti-commentary against those things. Through the lens of history, you just see that they affected change.
You know, decades of protest over native forest logging have had a real impact. So, I think they are more effective when people can look at it and go, I directly understand the point you are trying to make.
What is the role of the media in disruptive protest when it's more likely that that's going to be covered than a peaceful protest?
It's a good question. We don't generally just cover any protest. Like if people marching in the streets, they happen all the time. It needs a particular level of potency in terms of the message or the action that's taken and how that's affected
or the
people's lives.
magnitude
Or
of the participation.
Absolutely, certainly. And the magnitude of the government response.
Both elements active in this story, yeah.
Right. And these are subjective decisions we make. I think our role is to reflect to our audience and the public generally when there are these sorts of mass movements. People can draw their own assessments on whether it's the best way to go or it's justified.
But it is a judgment. I mean, your question's a valid one. If one or two attention-seeking people, do some attention-seeking thing, then reporting on them is just going to encourage more people to do that. But if you make the judgment that this is a considered movement by a considerable group of people that is deserving of reporting and attention, then we report on it.
They were discussing the role of the media in reporting on protests, but it was interesting to hear them validate the idea, first of all, that paradoxically the government might end up creating more protests than less protests through these draconian laws because they will get more media attention. And it was really interesting for me to hear these people, as what I consider part of the mainstream media, talking about how that it is disruptive direct action that gets media attention. And so that was almost validating, I think, disruptive direct action as a tactic.
Absolutely. If you want media there, just have a few arrests. The media doesn't come to protests just to a rally, however beautiful and colourful and moving and important it is, they're not interested. But get the police there, and suddenly you'll get media there. Then there's protests against these draconian fines and laws. So not only does it not stop the climate protest, it adds an additional layer of protest.
Just going back to how the media gets attracted to these disruptive disruptive actions, and it got me wondering about my own motivation to interview you, Rosie.
Oh.
Because, I will admit we definitely mix commentary with information on Radio MMT. And I think, my motivation was I do want to amplify the efforts of people like yourself, because I believe that we need to remind politicians that the majority of people, from what I've seen in some of the polls, the majority of Australians do want to see a move away from a fossil fuel economy, and the alternatives are right there in front of us, and we just need to get over this terrible hump of political will.
Absolutely. That is the whole elephant in the room, the political will that's missing. If there was political will, so many problems could be solved. So many books have been written, so many papers have been written by the finest minds in the world that have the solutions. They have worked it all out. They know exactly what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, when, who's going to do it. Yet the government doesn't move. This government that was elected on a climate platform.
Take it home, roll down. Take it home, roll down.
So, having gone through the experience that was, it was quite the roller coaster from what you described, like moments of real joy and solidarity, and then moments of utter terror. I'm just wondering, having gone through the experience, is there anything you would have done differently? And, of course, would you do it over again?
Well, one thing I would have done differently is make sure I didn't bring anything with me to the action that I didn't mind not having returned, because all our items are seized, everything we've got with us, but they're supposed to be returned afterwards. And there were quite a few things that we didn't get back. Otherwise, not really. I think that I was as prepared as I could be, and I don't think anything I did differently once in the hands of the police and corrective services would have made any difference to the outcome.
Would you do it again?
Of course. and the reason I would do it again is because I know that it's working. Can't remember, maybe it was Mahatma Gandhi who said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. And we're certainly up to the point where they are fighting us. And that's what these prohibitive sentencing is about, that the vilification and criminalisation of peaceful climate protesters is all about, trying to get the population against us. But that's not going to work. Nobody can ignore the catastrophes that are occurring as a result of fossil-fuelled climate heating.
It's interesting that you use that Gandhi quote. That will be well known to any of our listeners who are involved with the modern monetary theory community, because we often use that quote in relation to the heterodox economists dealing with the mainstream economics, and we are in the fighting phase too. And like you say, you can tell when you're in that phase, because that's when you're hitting the vilification from the mainstream.
I listen to Modern Monetary Theory, to your program, and I find it really, really interesting. And I'm not usually interested in economics. It just fits in with all these lies we're told about how economically devastating it would be if we had renewables, which is completely false.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I think what modern monetary theory contributes to discussions like this around global warming is that you can demolish the lie that moving to a post-carbon economy would be financially impossible. What we've really got to look at is what's happening at the resource level and what's happening at the geopolitical level. I think they're the two main reasons for why we're seeing the coal still leaving Newcastle Port. But we definitely don't need to be exporting coal for financial reasons.
Yeah. all the money that is wasted on military spending. And then the fact that with modern monetary theory, it's all rubbish that you can run out of money anyway. It's just...
One thing that does give me hope from the MMT point of view is that even though we might have spent however many billions of dollars on submarines, that spending does not mean we've run out of Australian dollars to spend on healthcare and education. So, of course, you can certainly bring your values into it and say, well, we'd rather not be spending on submarines. Again, it comes back to the resources. So that kind of spending could be a problem if that means that you're using all of your engineers and your researchers to build your nuclear capability or whatever. So that could be a problem with the spending. But the problem is never that we're going to run out of the dollars. So I just had to put that in from the MMT point of view.
Think it over.
I feel like that you have taken up the challenge very viscerally to cross swords with this resistance from the political class. What would you say to anyone who is listening who themselves might be very unhappy with the kinds of decisions that are being made supposedly in our name, but maybe they're not sure what to do or how to get involved? Do you have any advice for anyone who's listening?
Talk to other people who are already involved in groups, join a group. The groups that I work with, Extinction Rebellion, Blockade Australia and a couple of others, they have so many different roles. People think that you need to be prepared to get arrested.
Don your Haschem soup and tap dance on top of a coal train?
No, you can choose your own way to protest or just be behind the scenes. You can help make posters, you can create banners, you can be media people. There are lots of different roles, but don't be surprised if you eventually want to ramp things up a bit. But as they say, for every person arrested, then you need about 10 people around them to do all the other support work involved. And you will feel a lot better. It gives you a sense of hope to be around like-minded people, and you make wonderful friendships.
I will put links to the groups that you've mentioned in the show notes, and you can take that first tiny step, which is just go to the website, look at when the next meeting is that might be in your area, and make yourself known to these groups and see if anything suits you. I found myself when I was trying to find where I might fit in everything. Sometimes it takes more than one run-up to a group. You know, you might not gel with the people when you first go in, but a little bit of persistence, you will find the place that does bring you some of that joy.
Yeah. Don't just give up if the first time you go to a meeting you feel a little bit out of place. It might take a few goes, but...
And look where you'll get. Rosie is the example for all of us now.
Well, I was very shy about my first involvement in these organisations and did feel that I didn't really belong. And it did take a little while. But once you just immerse yourself and get over your fear of not fitting in and just embrace the people around you, and you will make probably some of your best friends, because there's no better friend than somebody you can talk about these things with and know that they get it and that they understand.
That sounds like a wonderful note to end on, Rosie. I really appreciate your time coming in today and having a chat with me. And I don't think we saw Kev at all today, but I hope he's doing well out there too. So thanks very much for your time, Rosie.
Pleasure. Lovely to be here, and I hope Kevin approves.
You've been listening to Radio MMT with Anne and Kev.
We'd love your feedback. Email us on radiommt@gmail.com or search Radio MMT on social media.
Listen to this show anytime wherever you get your podcasts or on 3cr.org.au/Radio MMT.
Support this show and the station by subscribing to 3cr.org.au and mention Radio MMT.
We thank all our guests.
And we thank economist Professor Bill Mitchell and his mmted.org. educating the masses on modern monetary theory.
And thank you to our listeners for listening. And I thank you, Kevin.
And I thank you, Anne. So what's planned for next week?
Kevin, there is still so much to talk about. We've got to expose all this rotten economics.
Well, no, that's good, and I get it. Do you reckon we could use a bit more music?
Well, I made a list of all these terrible economic theories. Like, I've heard of the theory of comparative advantage, or the quantity theory of money, or the loanable funds theory.
Have you heard of a band called Single Gun Theory? Like, they're a really good band. I'm sure there's a whole range of, like, macroeconomic music that I could bring into the show.
Yeah, but we really need to do marginal productivity theory, not to mention the natural rate of unemployment and the money multiplier.
You've got a pretty good singing voice. I play bass. Bill, he plays guitar. I reckon we could form a macroeconomics band. Like, we could deliver this whole message by music.
Well, we could call the band the permanent income hypothesis, or the Ricardian equivalence, or rational
I
expectations.
think we're onto something here. We're trying to make macroeconomics more interesting to the masses. We're going to, like, form this band and sing it to them. And we're going to bring the economists in. We're going to get musical.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.